And while we here in the United States have already seen reporters break lots of big stories from these documents, I actually think one of the most important revelations in these documents hasn't gotten a lot of attention in the United States quite yet. But it is a huge deal overseas. The story centers around this photograph that you can see right there on your screen. A photo that shows Epstein's fellow monster in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, as well as then Prince Andrew, who has now, of course, been stripped of his title by the British monarchy. But to avoid making things very confusing, I'm just going to keep calling him Prince Andrew. And that girl in the center, with Andrew's hand around her waist, is then 17-year-old Virginia Jeffery, the late Epstein survivor who tragically died by suicide just this past spring. Now, here's what Jeffery alleges happened that day in her posthumous memoir, Nobody's Girl. Jeffery was 17. She was staying with Epstein and Maxwell at Maxwell's home in London, just about 7 months after Maxwell had first recruited her from Mar-a-Lago, well after Epstein had allegedly started sexually abusing Jeffery. Maxwell woke her up that morning telling her it was going to be a special day, that she was going to meet a prince. And when Prince Andrew arrived at Maxwell's house that evening, Maxwell asked Prince Andrew to guess Jeffrey's age. The 41-year-old prince guessed correctly, 17 years old. Now, realizing that her mom would never forgive her if she met someone as famous as Prince Andrew and didn't pose for a picture, Jeffery got her camera, and Epstein snapped the photo. Then they all went to a nightclub. Prince Andrew bought Jeffery a cocktail and danced with her. And on their way back to Maxwell's house, Maxwell told Jeffery, "When we get home, you are to do for him what you do for Jeffery." Now, I'm going to spare you the rest of the truly wretched details. But Jeffery says that she and Prince Andrew had sex that night at Epstein and Maxwell's direction. And it was the first of 3 such encounters, which she also details in her book. Now, both Maxwell and Prince Andrew have both vehemently denied any of this ever happened. And a key part of that denial has been asserting that this photo, the infamous photo of them with a 17-year-old Jeffery, is fake.
It's a fake. I don't believe that. I don't believe it's real for a second. In fact, I'm sure it's not. There's never been an original. And further, there's no photograph. And I've only ever seen a photocopy of it. I don't believe it happened. And certainly the way as described would have been impossible.
Just to clarify, sir, you think that photo has been faked?
Nobody can prove whether or not that photograph has been doctored, but I don't recollect that photograph ever being taken.
Now, in addition to just denying the story, both Andrew, Prince Andrew that is, and Maxwell were adamant that, of course, the photo was faked, as you just heard them say. Even just this summer, in Maxwell's interview with Trump's personal lawyer turned deputy U.S. attorney, Todd Blanche, she flat out denied it. When Maxwell was asked about this particular photo that I've been showing you, she said, quote, "I believe it's literally a fake photo." That was just a couple months ago. But now, thanks to the trove of 23,000 documents from the Epstein estate that the House Oversight Committee released yesterday, we have this. On July 1st of 2011, just months after this photo was first published in the British tabloids, Epstein allegedly sent an email in which he said, quote, "Yes, she was on my plane, and yes, she had her picture taken with Andrew." Epstein denied, of course, everything else that took place and seemed to defend the photo by adding that many of his employees had also taken pictures with Prince Andrew. But he, the person, again, who allegedly took the photo, said the photo was real. That should be noted that Epstein himself is not exactly a reliable or trustworthy source, to put it mildly, and MSNBC has not independently confirmed the authenticity of the emails or the allegations in them. And both Maxwell and Andrew vehemently deny anything happened. But Epstein himself, way back in 2011, saying this photo was real in an email, really throws into question everything both Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell have said about the rest of that story. The fact that just months ago, Maxwell told Todd Blanche that photo was fake now adds all the more reason to be skeptical that anything she told Blanche in that meeting was true. The email is a gigantic story in the British media right now. It is an absolute scandal for understandable reason. And it is a massive piece of potentially vindicating evidence for Virginia Jeffery, who Maxwell, Epstein, and Prince Andrew have all claimed for more than a decade made everything up. Now, journalists have only had the documents the House Oversight Committee released for a little more than a day now. But Trump and the White House are already trying to discredit everything in this trove of documents. They're working overtime to do this. And they are trying to use the name of an Epstein survivor to get away with it. Yesterday, the very first email that the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released showed Epstein writing Ghislaine Maxwell to say that Trump was the, quote, dog that hasn't barked, and that a victim spent hours at Epstein's house with Trump. The Democrats on the committee redacted that victim's name, as they've tried to do with the names of all of the Epstein survivors, in part to allow them to tell their own stories on their own terms if they want to. But within an hour of the release, the Republican majority on the House Oversight Committee promptly outed the victim as Virginia Jeffery, apparently doing so just so they could point to past statements of Jeffrey's in which she said she had never seen Trump do anything wrong. So again, they're outing an Epstein survivor for political gain. And just to be clear, this was not a one-off. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt promptly did the same in a press release. And then at the White House press briefing yesterday, Leavitt had the gall to again invoke Jeffrey's name to defend Trump without even learning how to pronounce it.
Did the president ever spend hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim?
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. In this email you refer to with the name of a victim that was unredacted now and has since been reported on in this room, so I will go ahead and say it, Virginia Jeffery.
It's Virginia Jeffery. Sorry, that's just incredibly insulting. But here's what she went on to say.
Ms. Jeffery maintained, and God rest her soul, that she maintained that there was nothing inappropriate she ever witnessed, that President Trump was always extremely professional and friendly to her.
Now, again, the reason Caroline Leavitt and House Republicans were invoking and have been invoking Virginia Jeffrey's name is not to help tell her story or to push for releasing more documents like her family wants, but to try to cover Trump's butt. And it's not just the White House and Congress that are doing this.
Trump is all over the Epstein files, and I'm wondering if they're going to release those. Are you covering that tonight?
Not really, because the woman that apparently they're talking about is the one that said he was a gentleman and never did anything wrong.
Again, co-opting the story of a young woman who many survivors credit with inspiring them to tell their own stories, who is no longer here with us to keep telling hers, all for their own political gain. Joining me now are Sky and Amanda Roberts. They are the brother and sister-in-law of the late Virginia Roberts Jeffrey and advocates for justice in her memory. Whew, looking at your face, that's just going to make me cry too. But this is such an important story to talk about. Sky, as I just outlined yesterday, it's okay. Be however you want to feel in this moment. I think everybody is with you who's watching right now. Yesterday, after these emails were released, I felt such rage, and I think so many people did. And this is why I wanted to outline and tell the story. First, Republicans on the House Oversight Committee and then the White House afterwards confirmed Virginia's name as the identity of the individual whose name was redacted. I'm just going to repeat, there's a reason why individuals' names are redacted in these documents. There is a reason. And a lot of people out there, including Republicans, have said they want to protect the survivors' names. What was your reaction when you first saw that yesterday morning?
What another slap in the face from this administration. It was gut-wrenching. It made us angry. What disrespect. Our sister is an American hero. She and her testimony was the reason why they were even able to take these monsters down. And from the very beginning, all they have done is try to drag her name in the muck for redemption for our president. And it's just so disgraceful. They have had no regard for a family that is grieving a loss that they will never recover from. We will never recover from this loss. And there is a reason why names are redacted. Do you think because she's not here anymore that her family doesn't deserve protection, that her family doesn't deserve respect, that her legacy and her name doesn't deserve honor? And sure, she may not have had a personal experience with President Trump. But he is named in those files on multiple occasions. And nor are we here to sit here and accuse anyone of anything. What we are saying is if you are named under any circumstance, and it doesn't matter what party affiliation you are, you deserve to answer questions. You deserve to sit before the committee, before the American public, before the survivors, and tell them what you know. Tell them what you saw. And it is just beyond reprehensible of this White House, of the Republican Oversight Committee to do that, to violate her in that way and to violate us in that way.
I don't know, Sky, how you could add to the powerful statement that your wife just made, but what do you want people to understand about what it does to families? And there are so many other survivors out there. When the names of survivors, the names of people who have been victims of Jeffrey Epstein, of Ghislaine Maxwell, are released and put out there in the world like this?
Well, I think first I want to start with just, I don't think my sister or any survivor, excuse me, I'm very emotional tonight. I apologize.
You don't need to apologize.
But I don't think any survivor, including my sister, should be used as a political toy. These are sisters and mothers and daughters. Amanda mentioned we're grieving right now. I think the world is grieving a little bit for her because she's not here to speak for herself. And so it felt very disrespectful for them to unredact her name when she's not here to speak for herself. We're, of course, going to stand forward and we're going to continue to fight for her and all survivors out there, because I want to be very clear. If my sister was here today, she would be appalled by this administration. She would not refer to President Trump as a gentleman. He's not acknowledging survivors. Not once has he even acknowledged my sister in the sense of who she was as a hero. I mean, the reason we're even here today having this conversation, Jen, in which she should be sitting with you, not me, is because of her and so many brave survivors that came forward. And now these files are being released. And so I just think it's time to put a little respect on her name and all survivors' names and treat them as heroes. Mm-hmm. And stop, and just stop the nonsense, this political BS bullshit that just keeps coming out of his mouth and the administration's mouth. It needs to stop. Sorry.
It's okay. You can feel and say whatever you want to say. Just to be clear, I think people are feeling what you're feeling right now on your behalf. You know, part of what is so enraging here, there's so many things, is that she isn't here to tell her own story. You're the closest there is to tell her story. And one of this email that I've talked about is getting a lot of attention because it's talking about how Epstein says your sister spent hours in his house with Donald Trump. There's been so much speculation about what that means. How do you read it? Or is there anything you want people to understand of what you think it means?
I think it means there are still so many layers to uncover. I think there are so many things that we just don't know. She's never had a personal conversation to us about an interaction like that. That doesn't mean that it's true or not true. And I think that this just further proves how deep of an investigation is warranted here. This is why those files need to be released. This is why the paper trails need to be followed. Okay, we have to look into this deeper and we have to look at accountability here. I think that's what Virginia would want today. And she wants protection for herself, for her family, who she has left behind, and for every single survivor who consistently puts themselves at risk. And in trusting their government, Republican and Democrats, we are trusting you to do the right thing by us and protect survivors. No more shameful games. No more political party games. This is not a political issue. And I'm going to tell you this. Survivors don't care. And they didn't care when they were being abused, whether someone was a Republican or a Democrat. They don't care. We don't care. The American public do not care which party you fall on. If you are implicated in these heinous acts, it must come to light. We must do better. Our world is demanding that of us.
I'll just add, having worked in Democratic politics for 20 years, if Democrats in there, Democrats who are prominent, they should be named and outed too. This is about justice for survivors.
Right.
It has nothing to do with people's party affiliation. Let me ask you, because I think part of it is what happens now. And there is, of course, this discharge petition, which you have both been out there working so hard to advocate for, among so many other things. There's going to be a vote next week. It sounds like many more Republicans, to your point, Amanda, I think, are coming out and saying, or saying privately, that they're going to support this. There is a huge, big pressure campaign from the White House to keep people from getting on board. People have resisted that to date, but it's going to just amp up. Your voices are more powerful than their voices. What's the argument you want people to hear and understand about why it is so important, even if there are enough votes to pass this, that people who want to stand on the side of survivors, if they want to do that, they need to support this?
Well, I think we have a lot of momentum right now. I think that survivors' voices are truly being heard right now. I think all the work that my sister put in over the years and the truth that she told and the people that she took down, a prince is no longer a prince anymore. You mentioned that at the beginning of the show. She did real things, and this is not a hoax. All right. And you know what? The White House only wants it to not be a hoax when it's convenient for them. Right. They want to mention my sister's name and say, oh, so he's vindicated because my sister said so. Not true. Not true at all. She actually never said that once. She just said that you were nice to her, and, you know, and that doesn't mean that it didn't happen to somebody else. But for this petition in particular, we're very proud of all Democrats out there. Again, it's not a party issue, but every Democrat did sign on. And we have some really brave Republicans that stepped forward and said enough is enough. We're going to do this because it's the right thing to do. Because if I'm going to go home at night and look at my daughter in the face or my sister in the face,
what a day
I'm going to sign this damn petition. I'm going to do it right now because it's the right thing to do. And I'm hoping more Republicans gain that same traction and can hear the voices of survivors. I can tell you right now, I'll be the first one in Washington, D.C. tomorrow if you want to talk on the House floor or whatever floor you want to talk on, or at a coffee shop. I don't care what Republican is.
What a day to be the White House press secretary. As you can imagine, Caroline Leavitt fielded a lot of questions on the new developments regarding Trump's relationship with convicted child sex predator Jeffrey Epstein. And no surprise, she was not in any way forthcoming. Now, because of that, I'm going to do things just like a little bit differently today. First, I'm going to play for you some of the absurd answers she gave because they are worth hearing out loud. Then, I'm going to give you the truthful answer. Let's start with Weijia Zhang from CBS News.
Did the president ever spend hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim?
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep.
Okay, that was a lot of words that said very little there from Caroline. So let me just read you the actual text of the email that Weijia was referencing, because the email itself pretty clearly implies Trump was at his house. Here's the email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. You can see it right there on your screen. I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Then there's the redacted victim's name, which is redacted. Spend hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. Now, this is not at all about, my point of reading that is not at all about whether or not they were friends. We already knew they were close friends. It's not about whether or not Epstein was a member of Mar-a-Lago. Those were not the questions. So sidestepping a very clear, pretty direct question that literally is a reference to an email that was released today, kind of tells you everything you need to know there. Okay, Mary Bruce from ABC News, what do you got?
In the interest of transparency, why not just go ahead, release the full files on Epstein, get this all over with?
This administration has done more with respect to transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein than any administration ever. In fact, this administration, the Department of Justice, has turned over tens of thousands of documents to the American people.
We have? I mean, the American public is not dumb. The full Epstein files have not come remotely close to fully being released. In fact, what the Justice Department has released is a teeny tiny fraction of all the total files, as in less than 1%, according to Congressman Ro Khanna, who has been leading the effort to release the files. And frankly, Mary, to actually answer your question, I think today's news kind of speaks for itself. It has never been more clear why the Trump administration does not want to release the Epstein files than it is today. Okay, Mayor Bruce, it seems you have a follow-up question.
But given your interest in transparency, Caroline, why are White House officials then meeting with Representative Boebert in an effort to try and get her to not sign this petition calling for the release of the files?
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency?
No, that does not show your level of so-called transparency at all. I mean, what it shows is that the president, who was MIA or sometimes sleeping in the Oval Office over the course of the government shutdown, has suddenly woken up in order to protect himself. And now he's so focused on a pressure campaign that involves meetings with Republican members of Congress into the Situation Room and meltdowns on Truth Social. That's what he's focused on. This is definitely not transparency at all. It is more kind of like self-preservation. Okay, next up, Zolan Kano-Youngs from the New York Times. Go ahead.
Stephen, go ahead.
Well, if the president is considering a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell?
Again, he's answered this repeatedly. It's not something he's talking about or even thinking about at this moment in time. I can assure you of that.
At this moment in time is doing a lot of heavy lifting there in Caroline's answer. I mean, remember back in 2017, this is just one example, when White House lawyer Ty Cobb said there is no consideration at the White House of any pardon for Michael Flynn. Very clear there. And then 3 years later, boom, Trump pardoned the guy. Should Trump pardon Maxwell in the future, it would not be the first time a denial preceded the action. So don't lean too much into it. Okay, we have time for just one more. Jared Halpern of Fox Radio, I hear you have a non-Epstein related question. Make it quick.
Is the president intending to invite any Democrats over to have negotiations over these subsidies or any other plan to bring down the cost of health insurance?
That's an easy one. Don't hold your breath.
Joining me now is the New York Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman. He's a member of the House Judiciary Homeland Security Committee. He's a former federal prosecutor. So, Congressman, the White House says these emails prove nothing. Clearly, they raise questions. Do you think they do prove anything?
They absolutely prove something, which is that Donald Trump knew about Jeffrey Epstein's underage sex trafficking ring. And I say that because I point to the 2011 email with Ghislaine Maxwell, where Jeffrey Epstein wrote to Ghislaine about the dog that hasn't barked, Donald Trump, and that he spent hours with Virginia Giuffre in his house. And Ghislaine Maxwell says, I have been thinking about that. Now, the reason why that, to me, stands out is that these are two co-conspirators discussing something that would be detrimental to their own case. It would be admissible in court because of that. And it's in 2011, before Donald Trump was running for president, or you could claim that Jeffrey Epstein was trying to get him back. And so that just confirms what we have suspected from the 2002 50th birthday letter and the 2003 quote of Donald Trump, where he said that he knows Jeffrey Epstein likes girls on the younger side. And it further confirms that those DOJ Epstein files are going to be full of references to Donald Trump. Maybe it's benign, maybe it's his knowledge of it, maybe it's more, but there is no question that what we have seen over the last 6 months is a massive cover-up effort by Donald Trump to prevent the release of the DOJ's Epstein files, as opposed to these files from the estate.
Do you believe that that is why, Kash Patel looked like a deer in headlights soon after becoming the FBI director, when for months he'd been on podcasts before having any actual power, talking about, really getting those files have got to be released. It's all up to the FBI director. It's the people in power who are keeping it. And then as soon as he's in power, suddenly he's singing a different tune along with Dan Bongino.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head, Anderson. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino spent all of 2024 harping on a conspiracy theory about the Epstein files and how they need to be released right away. Pam Bondi then pretends or says that she's releasing the Epstein files in February. And then when called out and said, no, you're not releasing anything new, she made a big hullabaloo about how Kash Patel had not given her anything and she wants it on her desk in the next day, and a memo about what happened. And the FBI agents spent thousands of hours going through it to try to redact it. And then all of a sudden, dead silence. Absolutely nothing. Crickets. And the reason is that they went through it and realized that Donald Trump is all over it. And then Bondi went and told Donald Trump that he's in it. And they have gone into a massive, massive cover-up scheme to try to keep the DOJ files from being released. Next week, it seems like we are going to vote on having those files released. And we'll see what the Senate does, whether they want to engage in Donald Trump's cover-up just to protect himself, or whether they are going to listen to the American people and the victims and their survivors who are asking for those files to be released.
Congressman Goldman, thanks very much. David, at this point, the steady drip of Epstein news cannot possibly be beneficial to the White House. Why do you think the president and his top officials have been fighting this effort to release the files?
Anderson, I have no idea. Like many others in the party, I think would just like to see it be dumped a long time ago. Get everything out there. It is out there. Let the cards fall where they might. Let's put this behind us. I think what I've repeatedly said, Anderson, I think the most important thing. I'm sure these files are interesting. I don't think they're going to be damning for the president. I think there was anything in there that would have been leaked out by the past administration over the 4 years that they were in there. But I always keep saying, like, why don't we just call on the prosecutors who did this case, the federal prosecutors in Southern District of Miami, the U.S. attorney, and let's ask them why they gave Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal. That's, I think, the most important question here. Why did he get a sweetheart deal? What were the causes behind that? Not so much what's in these files at this point. I mean, I think everything that is going to be out at this point, but just dump it, get it out. I mean, the president ran on it. I think people want to know, Republicans, Democrats, and it is not getting better. It might go away after the House has this vote. The Senate's not going to take it up. The president surely won't sign it. So it'll become a moot point at some point soon. But they're a big part of the MAGA-verse and others that want to see transparency.
Bakari, I mean, it's interesting because David was talking about the prosecutors down in Florida. One of them had reportedly been prepared to have a multi-count, dozens of count indictment, but that was not taken up by the lead attorney, obviously, who has appeared before Congress. Do you see any alternative strategy the White House could adopt besides releasing the files? Obviously, if the president, if they did pass the Senate and it got as far as the president's desk, which, as David said, is highly unlikely, do you think the ramifications of him not releasing them would be great?
So there is an alternative strategy. I think you just laid it out, which is just to kind of let time heal all. The problem is this is a bed that Donald Trump has made. He's been talking about the Epstein files since 2015. And I think that it becomes a little bit more complicated than what my good friend David Urban said when you're talking about just have the prosecutor who gave him the sweetheart deal come and testify in front of Congress, because now we have evidence that Ghislaine Maxwell is getting a sweetheart deal currently as she's sitting in federal prison. And she's in accommodations that are not necessarily deemed for those who are child sex offenders or child sex traffickers. And so it becomes a little bit more complicated than that. And we also know that she sat down with Todd Blanche for, I believe, 9 hours. And we know that the comments she gave Deputy Attorney General Blanche are diametrically opposed to the emails that came out. And so, I think that the only thing that you can do, people always say that sunshine is the best disinfectant. Right now, there is a great deal of hesitancy, not just from the MAGA base, but everyone, And then you have other politics at play. I mean, you have people like Nancy Mace who signed on to the discharge petition, and she's running for a governor of the state of South Carolina. Does that mean that somebody else, for example, gets that endorsement? So there's so many politics at play. But at the end of the day, one of the things that we know to be a fact is that Donald Trump palled around with the most notorious sex offender we have in the country. And he is reticent to giving the American public the full context of that relationship and Jeffrey Epstein's relationships with others.
David, why wouldn't the president just, I mean, he's been asked multiple times about commuting Ghislaine Maxwell's sentence. Why wouldn't he just say, yeah, no, she's a convicted sex offender, or it's not something I would, I mean, he's talked about, oh, I'll talk to the Justice Department, I don't know anything about it, which is what he often says.
Hey, Anderson, I don't have an answer for you. I don't know. I dispute with what Bakari says. Listen, at the end of the day, when all this gets out there, I don't think Donald Trump's going to have any fingerprints anywhere on these documents. Obviously, I can't be certain. I've not reviewed 30,000 plus pages or whatever there is left remaining. But again, I would suspect that during the 4 years of the Biden administration, if there were some damning, Anderson, you and I and Bakari, we sat and watched Donald Trump be led into courtroom after courtroom by Democrats, in power, trying to take the guy down. If there was a kernel of something in there that could take Donald Trump down, it would have been leaked already many years ago. So I think they should dump it, get over it, move past it quickly, move on to things that people care about in America, like pocketbook issues, their inflation and jobs. And I think this administration would do well to get to that point and start talking about the things they're doing to make people's lives better.
All right, David Urban, Bakari Sellers, thank you.
And joining us now, a key member of the House Oversight Committee, Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas. She also sits on the House Judiciary Committee. Congresswoman, thanks very much for being here.
Absolutely.
At this point, does the House Oversight Committee have, to your knowledge, more documents to put out? Do you know more about what these documents may say about President Trump or other powerful politicians that the public does not know yet?
Yeah, there's still more that committee staff is going through and determining what needs to be redacted before the release. And then we always consult with leadership on the Republican side as well before any drops are made public. And I fully anticipate that we will receive more, at least from the estate of Epstein. It does not seem like the Department of Justice has really been inclined to actually participate, which is one reason that we're talking about this discharge petition and talking about this vote. It's because we need something with a little bit more fire behind it to hopefully get the Department of Justice to finally start to cooperate.
Why is it that Epstein's estate, I mean, the Todd Blanche, the president's deputy attorney general now, he wrote this morning that when he went to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, quite a moment, that law enforcement didn't have the materials that Epstein's estate hid for years and only just provided to Congress. Why is he saying this now, and why is the estate talking to Congress if not to the DOJ?
Have you ever heard of CYA? That's exactly what we've got going on. And it was interesting because you made a Freudian slip. You said the president's attorney. You're right. That's who he is.
I should have said former personal attorney.
That's who he is, though. Like, I'm sticking with it. I get what you got to say. But at the end of the day, that's what he's been trying to do. He's been trying to do Trump's bidding. He has not been acting like anyone's attorney general. And we know that when it comes down to whether you're the deputy or whether you are, say, Pam Bondi, the actual AG, you are supposed to be the people's attorney. But she has decided that she wants to neglect the people and do whatever it is that Trump wants her to do, along with Todd Blanche. So here it is. He's like, well, I didn't have all the information. Well, sir, did you try to get the rest of the information? Do we know for sure that the Department of Justice didn't have this information? And if they didn't have this information, do we know whether or not they actually deleted this information? Do we know that there was a thorough investigation? Do we know whether or not the investigation had concluded? These are all questions that we need answers to, but we can't get them when you're not cooperating. So we don't know what the DOJ has, nor what it is that the DOJ potentially was trying to do. Considering that the president right now is trying to obstruct on some very basics of let's just get a subpoena that says release all the information, I wouldn't be surprised, just like he obstructed the prosecution of one of his henchmen who took $50,000 in taxpayer dollars from undercover officers. I wouldn't be surprised if he sent a message and said, stop investigating. We're done with this. Epstein's dead. I don't want to hear anything else about it.
Do you have any evidence of that claim?
I have no idea. No, that's the whole point. I have no information. And that's why we need these files to be released, because we are looking for transparency, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. Listen, if people decide that they want to continue to support a person who may be a pedophile himself, or a person who obviously is covering for pedophiles, that's on them. But they should know at least the devil that they have decided to pick.
We saw at the top of the show a number of, at the time, Donald Trump surrogates and supporters, including his son and his vice presidential nominee, say that the Epstein files should be released. Obviously, there was a Democrat who was president at the time, Joe Biden. Why were Democrats not louder at that time about this release?
So a couple of things. Number one, you had pending litigation. So we're not the ones that went out making some campaign promises. In fact, the vast majority of Democrats had been campaigning on things such as affordability. I know that Kamala Harris had an actual plan so that people wouldn't necessarily be stuck in a mortgage for 50 years, but instead she wanted to make sure that they could have $25,000 down payment so that they could move into homes and make life overall more affordable. So we were focused on the bread and butter issues. This was a campaign issue of his. But while there was pending litigation, if you look at when Maxwell was finally convicted, and honestly, she just finished probably one of her last appeals here recently. You are not usually in the middle of an active case and then you say, oh yes, we're going to release everything. That's not how that goes. So she was prosecuted under the Biden-Harris administration. So no, this was not something to do at that point in time. At this point in time, it's clear that they are not interested in going forward with any additional prosecutions, in addition to the fact that the survivors have come forward. They are begging Congress to do this. This is not something that the survivors were necessarily doing at that time. They were still believing in the system and hoping that it would work.
What's your sense? The survivors obviously have been on Capitol Hill, and of course, many of them endured just horrific things. They have said it should not be on them to provide a list of the people that they encountered. Do you, in the course of your work on the committee and perhaps discussions with them, have any understanding or thinking that they may change their position on that, that we may see a list from them?
I don't think so. Let me tell you something. There's been recent reporting where MAGA seems to be upset because I have to pay for security. I'm actually upset that I have to pay for security as well. The threats that come with being on the other side of this president are significant and serious. And so when you have a list of women and they are the ones that are making these claims, for anybody that doesn't want to believe the truth, then they will start to go after them. They will start to threaten their families. It would be better if we had the contemporaneous reports from law enforcement where they called in at those moments and gave the reports of what was happening. It's kind of like the birthday letter that he wants to pretend is a hoax. That was a contemporaneous writing at that time. This was not produced in real time, and they don't want it to be seen as partisan or political. They just want people to believe in the facts. And so if it is that they reported this, maybe even before he was president, then maybe people will actually believe it versus the hate that they get thrown at them in this moment. So no, I don't think that they'll do it. I think it's the smartest thing that they can do for safety. It is sad that we have survivors that feel like they can't be safe from an American president and his cronies, but that's where we are.
While you're here, I also want to ask you about some of the other political stories that have been unfolding on the Hill. Obviously, the longest government shutdown in history recently ended. There has been a lot of criticism of the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer from fellow members of yours in the House of Representatives, from the progressive base. Chuck Schumer has defended himself in part by saying over the months that he knows how to win elections. Do you think that Chuck Schumer still knows how to win elections?
No, I know nothing about his strategies on winning elections. That is for sure.
You're thinking about running for Senate yourself.
I am absolutely thinking about running for Senate, and I'm hoping to have an answer within my inner circle probably within the next week and a half or so. But I will tell you this. I will tell you that I completely understand those that are disappointed. I will tell you that on November 4th, we won in places that we weren't supposed to win in, whether we're looking at Georgia or whether we're looking at Mississippi or whether we're looking at different parts of Virginia, where now we're going to end up having a supermajority in the House or in the Commonwealth in the House. I will tell you this. I will tell you that ultimately the decision about who is best to lead the Senate comes from the Senate. It's only the senators that get to make that decision. They are the ones with information that we don't have. I don't know if there's someone that can fundraise stronger than Chuck Schumer. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know what all Chuck does when it comes to making sure that we have the best chances with the Senate map that we're given in any given election cycle. And I trust our senators in the Senate to decide on who is best to lead them.
I'll be honest, this makes it sound to me like you are planning on running for Senate.
I can tell you for sure that I have not made a decision. I will also tell you that we have a poll that is currently in the field. It went into the field on yesterday. I am waiting on those results. It's the first and only poll that I've put out to be able to kind of understand where I really am. I don't want to rely just solely on third-party polls.
So basically you're polling yourself to try to make a decision about what you should do.
I am. I'm polling to determine whether or not I can expand the electorate, and I believe that I can. But if I can't, I can tell you for sure, 100%, that I will not run.
Fair enough. And it sounds to me like perhaps you've answered this question already, but have you thought about, would you support Chuck Schumer if you were a senator to be the leader?
I haven't, but I will tell you that if there are other people that are interested, because I don't know who wants these jobs sometimes, if there are other people that are interested in running for that post, I absolutely would plan to hear everyone out, as I've not worked as closely with the Senate. You know, most people don't realize that House Democrats and Senate Democrats, we don't even get together as like caucuses. We literally, whatever senators you have a relationship with or you interact with, it's because you work with them kind of one-on-one. And I can tell you that I've never had any piece of legislation that I've had to work one-on-one with Schumer on. I can tell you that I've worked with Senator Cornyn, who is up for re-election, a number of times on a number of pieces of legislation. He's actually not been the worst Republican that you can find in the Senate, to be perfectly honest.
Have you talked to Schumer about the possibility of your running for Senate?
I have not.
You have not?
I have not.
And what do you think about your colleague, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, potentially running against him? Good idea, bad idea?
I think that that's up to the people of New York. I think, you know, there is this feeling within our base that we need to have younger people. I will tell you that I don't necessarily just subscribe to ageism. I'm gonna be perfectly honest, because even when you look at the votes and you look at the 6 Democrats that actually broke ranks yesterday out of the House, I can tell you that they weren't all elderly. There were a number of very young people. Definitely one of the members is younger than me. So I think that it is about who is willing to fight in this moment and what does that fight look like. So I think New York will have to decide, if Alex does decide to run, who is built for this moment. And I really want to urge all Americans that were disappointed with the 8 Senate Democrats to not get disappointed or disenchanted with the party as a whole. But when you go out, don't just vote for a Democrat. Vote for a Democrat that is ready for the fight that we're in at this moment, one that is looking for accountability with this rogue administration.
All right, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, thanks very much for spending some time with us today.
Absolutely.
Appreciate having you.
A big break. Republicans breaking with Trump on Epstein. House GOP leaders bracing tonight for a significant number of Republican defections. Republicans going to break from Trump and support a bipartisan bill calling for the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Trump not helping his cause here, ignoring questions today about why his name appears in newly released Jeffrey Epstein emails thousands of times.
Sir, any response to the Epstein emails that mention your name?
Silence. But it was thousands of times his name was included in new emails. And those emails, by the way, are only a fraction of the actual, still unreleased Epstein files, which all leads to the most basic, fundamental question. It is a glaring question. Why is Trump acting like a person desperately trying to hide something? After all, when Trump didn't have the power to release the Epstein files, he said he was all for them being made public.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would. I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
Well, he's got a big problem with it. He now has the power to follow through. And now, instead, he's called the whole situation a hoax again and again and again and again and again. He said that anyone supporting the files release is engaged in a quote-unquote hostile act to his administration. And he said that any Republican willing to vote for the files release is dumb and stupid. Why? It makes absolutely no sense. And we're not the only ones asking these questions. Listen to MAGA stalwart Megyn Kelly.
Why didn't Trump just release these? Just release them. Just release them, right? Like now he's in the position of being like singled out as the only one, allegedly, as opposed to one of a slew of names. The Democrats, of course, are going to make a ton of hay over it. And I don't know that there's any there whatsoever, but I concede that they sound bad. They don't sound good.
And what she's talking about there is just that 20,000 pages of emails, right, that include Trump's name thousands of times. They make it sound like Epstein and Trump were very close for a very long time. Now, we know there was a period of time that they were essentially best friends. Many have described them that way to us. But even a whole decade after Trump said he dumped Epstein from Mar-a-Lago for being a, quote, creep, these emails were being sent around. A lot of really important people still going to Epstein for advice about Trump. One example is in June of 2018, weeks before Trump's first big official summit with Putin. Epstein emails a former top European official offering help, writing, quote, I think you might suggest to Putin that Lavrov can get insight on talking to me. Vitaly Churkin used to, but he died. Now, Churkin had been the longest-serving Russian ambassador to the United Nations. Kristen Holmes is at the White House to begin our coverage tonight. And Kristen, something that, months ago, certainly at the beginning of the summer, right, when Trump denied that his own DOJ had told him his name was in the Epstein files, a day that he probably didn't think would ever come. House GOP seeming to flee from him. Leaders there bracing for a big number of Republicans to break from Trump, vote to release the Epstein files. How concerned is Trump about this?
Well, the White House is watching it very closely. I mean, what we know right now is that Speaker Johnson today essentially did a reverse course. The White House and the Speaker's office have been working together to try and stop this bill from actually being taken up for a vote. Then all of a sudden you see Speaker Johnson saying that he's going to expedite it. It's going to be brought to the floor as early next week. We are told that President Trump and Speaker Johnson discussed this together, and essentially it was made clear to the president by both Speaker Johnson as well as several advisors that this was the inevitable, that this had to move forward and that there was no reason in stopping it, just get it over with. And President Trump seems to have conceded that idea. So while you're hearing him say these things about people being dumb or going against the wishes of the administration, there is a really real belief here at the White House that this is going to pass through the GOP House. Now, of course, the big question is what happens then when it lands in the GOP-led Senate? Yeah. What is the White House going to do? Are they going to take issue with senators? Are they going to personally whip senators? And I'm told that a decision has not yet been made on what their strategy is going to be once they do believe that this passes through the House and lands in the Senate, because there is also a resignation, an understanding among many White House officials that there's really not much they can do to stop this momentum, that there are senators as well as House members who have said that this is something they want, and it is going to be something that they vote to move forward, the release of these documents. So again, the White House is watching all of this very closely. That will then lead to, if it does pass in the Senate, this landing on President Trump's desk. And I'm told that that's not even part of the discussion right now. All the discussion is what they're going to do in the next steps when this goes through the House, which they believe that it will. I have talked to a number of his allies, people on the outside who have defended President Trump for years, who support him, who still support him. But a lot of them sound like Megyn Kelly. They have a lot of questions as to why the White House is not getting ahead of this. One reason I'm told is that President Trump himself is dictating all of the response to this, and that is part of the reason that you're seeing it as a much more reactive response, because that is what he wants.
Yeah, well, and it is, of course, something when people take a step back and say, why would anyone not want to put out the files of a pedophile and who knew and who aided and who participated, right? I mean, people don't want to be on the wrong side of that one, and it's obvious the right side. Kristen, thank you very much. As we, I think Kristen pointing out the crucial question, right? What will happen if it gets through the Senate and gets to Trump's desk? Well, Stacey Williams is out front now. She is a former Sports Illustrated model who dated Epstein in the early 1990s. She was one of the first people to come on this show and make it clear that Epstein and Trump, in your words, Stacey, were quote unquote best friends. And so many others, after you said that, talked about the closeness of their relationship over many years. We heard it again and again from others who knew them after you spoke. And Stacey also went public in 2024 with accusations that Trump groped her in 1993 in front of Epstein at Trump Tower. Allegations, of course, Trump has denied. Stacey, I really appreciate your taking the time and coming on tonight. Obviously, the Epstein files are one thing, and they're still under lock and seal. These emails, though, from the Epstein estate that include Trump's name in them thousands of times have gotten even more GOP members to say it's time for them to jump ship with Trump on this one and vote for the release of the files. Did you ever think you'd see this happen?
That Republicans are supporting the release of the files?
Yeah.
Well, we've had a few, right? You know, I've never understood the sort of the role of legislative officials in protecting pedophiles. I didn't think that was part of the job criteria. So it's been very confusing to me. But if some of them are finally arriving at some moral clarity, you know, that's a good thing. Transparency is critical. And I was quite shocked to hear the White House say yesterday that they're being fully transparent after dragging a member of Congress there to get her to pull back her vote on releasing the Epstein files. It's condescending to the American people, and it is cruel and damaging to the Epstein survivors.
Yes, and I know you're obviously talking about Lauren Boebert there, who has remained steadfast in her decision to vote for the release of the files.
I commend her. Yes.
Yeah, under incredible pressure.
Yeah.
In the emails that we have, and again, every time I say that, I just want to distinguish that these emails are from the estate, so they are Epstein files or something different. But the emails themselves reveal a lot of information, Stacey. They talk about the close relationship, you know, wingman type relationship that Trump and Epstein had, which you've talked about when you talked about how they were best friends during the time that you knew them. This is a video I'm showing of from NBC that shows Trump and Epstein at a party in Mar-a-Lago. It's all the way back in 1992, an important year for you, Stacey, because that's the year you met Epstein. And what they're doing in that video is watching women on the dance floor, and Trump appears to say to Epstein, "She's hot," referring to a woman. They're then pointing fingers. Now, in one of the emails that we have in the context of that video, Epstein says he gave Trump one of his girlfriends. He writes, "My 20-year-old girlfriend in 93 that after 2 years I gave to Donald." Now, by the way, you met him in 1992. When you see that, though, in this email in black and white, I quote unquote gave to Donald, what's your reaction?
I mean, it screams about, you know, the mindset of these men. You know, the same two men who did what they did to me when Jeffrey Epstein walked me into Donald Trump's office to be groped by him. Clearly, we are these objects, these trophies, and it's deeply misogynistic.
What a day to be the White House press secretary. As you can imagine, Caroline Leavitt fielded a lot of questions on the new developments regarding Trump's relationship with convicted child sex predator Jeffrey Epstein. And no surprise, she was not in any way forthcoming. Now, because of that, I'm going to do things just like a little bit differently today. First, I'm going to play for you some of the absurd answers she gave because they are worth hearing out loud. Then I'm going to give you the truthful answer. Let's start with Weijia Zhang from CBS News.
Did the president ever spend hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim?
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep.
Okay. That was a lot of words that said very little there from Caroline. So let me just read you the actual text of the email that Weijia was referencing, because the email itself pretty clearly implies Trump was at his house. Here's the email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. You can see it right there on your screen. I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Then there's the redacted victim's name, which is redacted. Spend hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, et cetera. I'm 75% there. Now, this is not at all about, my point of reading that is not at all about whether or not they were friends. We already knew they were close friends. It's not about whether or not Epstein was a member of Mar-a-Lago. Those were not the questions. So sidestepping a very clear, pretty direct question that literally quotes is a reference to an email that was released today kind of tells you everything you need to know there. Okay, Mary Bruce from ABC News. What do you got?
In the interest of transparency, why not just go ahead, release the full files on Epstein, get this all over with?
This administration has done more with respect to transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein than any administration ever. In fact, this administration, the Department of Justice, has turned over tens of thousands of documents to the American people.
We have? I mean, the American public is not dumb. The full Epstein files have not come remotely close to fully being released. In fact, what the Justice Department has released is a teeny tiny fraction of all the total files, as in less than 1%, according to Congressman Ro Khanna, who has been leading the effort to release the files. And frankly, Mary, to actually answer your question, I think today's news kind of speaks for itself. It has never been more clear why the Trump administration does not want to release the Epstein files than it is today. Okay, Mary Bruce, it seems you have a follow-up question.
But given your interest in transparency, Caroline, why are White House officials then meeting with Representative Boebert in an effort to try and get her to not sign this petition calling for the release of the files?
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency?
No, that does not show your level of so-called transparency at all. I mean, what it shows is that the president, who was MIA or sometimes sleeping in the Oval Office over the course of the government shutdown, has suddenly woken up in order to protect himself. And now he's so focused on a pressure campaign that involves meetings with Republican members of Congress into the Situation Room and meltdowns on Truth Social. That's what he's focused on. This is definitely not transparency at all. It is more kind of like self-preservation. Okay, next up, Zolan Kano-Youngs from the New York Times. Go ahead.
Stephen, go ahead.
Well, if the president is considering a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell.
Again, he's answered this repeatedly. It's not something he's talking about or even thinking about at this moment in time. I can assure you of that.
At this moment in time is doing a lot of heavy lifting there in Caroline's answer. I mean, remember back in 2017, this is just one example, when White House lawyer Ty Cobb said there is no consideration at the White House of any pardon for Michael Flynn. Very clear there. And then 3 years later, boom, Trump pardoned the guy. Should Trump pardon Maxwell in the future? It would not be the first time a denial preceded the action. So don't lean too much into it. Okay, we have time for just one more. Jared Halpern of Fox Radio. I hear you have a non-Epstein related question. Make it quick.
Is the president intending to invite any Democrats over to have negotiations over these subsidies or any other plan to bring down the cost of health insurance?
That's an easy one. Don't hold your breath. Now, journalists have only had the documents the House Oversight Committee released for a little more than a day now. But Trump and the White House are already trying to discredit everything in this trove of documents. They're working overtime to do this. And they are trying to use the name of an Epstein survivor to get away with it. Yesterday, the very first email that the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released showed Epstein writing Ghislaine Maxwell to say that Trump was the, quote, dog that hasn't barked, and that a victim spent hours at Epstein's house with Trump. The Democrats on the committee redacted that victim's name, as they've tried to do with the names of all of the Epstein survivors, in part to allow them to tell their own stories on their own terms if they want to. But within an hour of the release, the Republican majority on the House Oversight Committee promptly outed the victim as Virginia Jeffery, apparently doing so just so they could point to past statements of Jeffrey's in which she said she had never seen Trump do anything wrong. So again, they're outing an Epstein survivor for political gain. And just to be clear, this was not a one-off. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt promptly did the same in a press release. And then at the White House press briefing yesterday, Leavitt had the gall to again invoke Jeffrey's name to defend Trump without even learning how to pronounce it.
Did the president ever spend hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim?
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And this email you refer to with the name of a victim that was unredacted now and has since been reported on in this room, so I will go ahead and say it, Virginia Jeffery.
It's Virginia Jeffery. Sorry, that's just incredibly insulting. But here's what she went on to say.
Ms. Jeffery maintained, and God rest her soul, that she maintained that there was nothing inappropriate she ever witnessed, that President Trump was always extremely professional and friendly to her.
Now, again, the reason Caroline Leavitt and House Republicans were invoking and have been invoking Virginia Jeffrey's name is not to help tell her story or to push for releasing more documents like her family wants, but to try to cover Trump's butt. And it's not just the White House and Congress that are doing this.
Trump is all over the Epstein files, and I'm wondering if they're going to release those. Are you covering that tonight?
Not really, because the woman that apparently they're talking about is the one that said he was a gentleman and never did anything wrong.
Again, co-opting the story of a young woman who many survivors credit with inspiring them to tell their own stories, who is no longer here with us to keep telling hers, all for their own political gain. Joining me now are Sky and Amanda Roberts. They are the brother and sister-in-law of the late Virginia Roberts.
This morning, the pressure is mounting on President Trump and the Justice Department to release all of the files related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. After a House committee made public 20,000 more pages of documents, the House is now set to vote on the matter next week. And among those demanding full transparency, Epstein's survivors. Here is one of those survivors who talked to Aaron Burnett.
We need the government to release everything that's in these files, of course with the appropriate redactions to protect the privacy of the survivors, but we really need this information to be out there so these crimes can be investigated. I think it's really upsetting to us that this is so politicized when it's not a political issue. This was a crime, and it's a crime of sex trafficking, and we really just want to see justice for the crime that happened to us.
Survivor Liz Stein there just asking for justice. CNN's Harry Enton is here with us. Now, look, when you talk to you hear from the victims, it is very clear what they want. They've made that clear again and again. What does the American public think about how Donald Trump has been handling the Epstein files compared to all the other issues that he brought up during the campaign?
Yeah, you know, Donald Trump is underwater on basically every single issue he ran on in 2024. But the Epstein files, the Epstein case, are especially dreadful for him. What are we talking about here? Well, let's take a look at Trump's net approval rating on the issue. Look, they're all in red. They're all in the negative territory. But on immigration, you know, he's 5 points underwater. Foreign policy, 8 points. Trade and tariffs, he's 17 points. The economy, 18 points. But look at the Epstein case. He is 39 points below water on the Epstein case. His net approval is 39 points in the negative. My goodness gracious. What Donald Trump has been selling on the Epstein files, the Epstein case, the American people, simply put, have not been buying at all, Sarah Seidner.
All right, so is there any sign that things have gotten better since there have been some things that have been released?
Yeah, okay.
Although released by Democrats.
There have been some things that have been released. Donald Trump has been trying to make some sort of case saying that, you know, the folks don't necessarily care about it. But take a look here. Approve of the Trump admin on the Epstein case in early July, right, when you had those DOJ droppings, right? It was 17%. Look at where we were by late September, the latest poll I could find it. 20%. You know, we often talk about Donald Trump having this floor, right, of at about 40%. On this particular issue, he is less than half the level of the supposed floor. There is just nobody in the electorate who is buying this. They do not like the way that the Trump administration has been handling this case one iota.
Republicans have generally said they like what Donald Trump is doing, generally speaking. How do they feel about the Epstein case?
Okay, so you see, you know, approve of Trump on the Epstein case. This is overall, right? And you see 17%, you say 20%. That is way below the 40% floor that Donald Trump supposedly has. How does that possibly happen? It's because of Republicans. Because look at this number. Okay, Republicans who approve of Trump's job as president, 87%. That is basically in line with the long-term average, 85, 90, 95%. But look at the Trump admin's job on the Epstein case. Just 45% of Republicans, less than half of Republicans are even buying what the administration is telling. Look, we're not necessarily sure whether or not this case has moved the ball on Trump's overall approval rating yet, but I can tell you that the more that this case is in the news, the worse it is for Donald Trump, because simply put, it is his worst issue by far.
We could be seeing a vote on this next week. This case is not going away anytime soon.
It is not going away anytime soon, and that is bad news politically for Donald John Trump.
All right, thank you so much, Harry Enton. And now joining us is John Berman, hopefully.
Thank you, thank you
There
very
he is.
much.
He's over there.
I am so pleased to be with you today, Sarah Seidner. Thank you very much. With us now also is senior politics reporter for Axios, Mark Caputo. Mark, I've been reading you for years, but overnight, your story on what's been happening in the White House really over the last 24 hours. Plus, not every story is a process story, but boy, the process here is fascinating because of how the White House is handling this. Why are they doing what they're doing?
We can only speculate. And the speculation that circulates in Trump's orbit, whether it's some people around the White House, longtime advisors, confidants, is that Trump's name in some way, form, or fashion is in the Epstein files. And that really bothers him because he knows that if you have Trump and Epstein in a file, it's going to be a headline and it's going to dominate news coverage, social media discussion, be all over television. Just consider what's happened here. There wasn't a smoking gun in this trench of emails that was released, yet it's just totally dominated everything. So imagine if there's an investigative file, a criminal investigative file or files, where Trump's name is mentioned in some form or fashion. Again, I don't know what that form or fashion is. It would be what we're seeing now, just on steroids.
And what exactly have they been doing? There's the stuff that CNN has reported on. We know about a situation room meeting with Lauren Boebert. But what else is happening behind the scenes?
Well, from what we understand, they've made a number of calls, including the president had played phone tag at one point with Nancy Mace, the South Carolina representative. And he doesn't want this, I'm sorry to use the phrase discharge petition, most people don't know what it is, but he doesn't want this measure backed by Republicans to go to the floor, but it increasingly looks like that's going to fail and there is going to be a full vote on it. Ultimately, Trump had decided in July that despite his campaign trail promise, despite the comments of his advisors, now J.D. Vance, or better said, now Vice President J.D. Vance, Pam Bondi, now the Attorney General, Kash Patel, now the FBI Director, on the campaign trail, they were saying, oh, the Epstein files are going to be released. July rolls around in 2025. Trump says, nope. And once that decision was made, it just sort of created this snowball effect, and Trump is living with it, or I guess maybe a better phrase is karma. This is political karma, the law of action and reaction. You promise you're going to do something, then you reverse yourself, and then it already becomes this massive political issue that just becomes very difficult to escape.
And what's the mood inside the White House over this, and how do, and you've done reporting on this, how do insiders feel about what would happen if they approached the president on different ways of managing this?
Oh, the people I've spoken to who talk to the president say, look, we don't talk about this with him because he's just going to get angry and lose his temper. And as a result, that's how you're seeing, or that's why you're seeing him act in this way. The White House is bothered by this release of emails from the Democrats because it was released in a strategic way, a political way, to coincide with the ending of the shutdown. Also, the sort of most, eyebrow-raising email, the one from Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell, that the Democrats released, they purposely redacted the name of the victim. And from what we understand, that victim, Virginia Jeffery, was a person who was not a victim of Donald Trump. In addition to that, had testified, had written, had spoken, had publicly said that Donald Trump didn't sexually assault her. She didn't know of Donald Trump sexually assaulting anyone, and that she had good relations with Donald Trump, friendly and legal, warm relations with him. And the fact that the Democrats had redacted that really, really bothers the White House, because the Democrats essentially sort of got one over on them, and they spent an entire day on defense. And this is a White House that likes to drive the narrative, not have the narrative driven against them. But obviously they were in a situation where they were just on that defensive, crouching on a back foot.
You know, it is interesting with the discharge petition, which does seem like it will go, and I use the words too, but this vote on the House floor, where the full House will vote on calling for the full release from the Justice Department of the so-called Epstein files. But that doesn't mean they'll be released, because then the Senate has to vote on it and the president would have to sign it into law there. So the president can stop this. The question is, why is he fighting so hard? Is it clear to you why he's fighting so hard, therefore, and why he's used so much capital and had Speaker Mike Johnson use so much capital to keep this vote from happening?
Well, this is how Donald Trump is. If he doesn't want something, he fights tooth and nail to make it not happen. And if he wants something, he does that as well to make it happen. Here he doesn't want it to happen, and he's just going to fight tooth and nail. And he doesn't matter how many sort of rakes he's going to step on in the process in doing it. He fights. Sometimes the way he fights hurts him. You saw, for instance, and I referenced in the piece in Axios today, in 2017, in the Russia investigation, if Donald Trump had sort of let FBI Director James Comey go and just, do some typical law enforcement work, it probably would have just blown over. But instead, Donald Trump fired James Comey, and that triggered the Russia investigation. Then there was COVID, and the way he handled COVID, he got a lot of criticism for it, and so he called that a hoax, and people didn't understand, well, what's he actually calling a hoax? The other day on Sunday, Donald Trump was asked about the affordability crisis on Fox News in a friendly interview, and he called the affordability crisis a con job. So Donald Trump sort of reacts very negatively to criticisms and issues that reflect badly on him or that his critics say reflect badly on him. And he doesn't always react in a way that helps him. Sometimes he doubles down or he gets so heavy-handed that it winds up making the story bigger and making the story more negative for him. And I think that's what you're seeing here. Had he gone along with his campaign trail promise and released the Epstein files or come up with a process to release them slowly in some sort of deliberative process, we probably wouldn't be talking about this right now. But that's not the situation that Donald Trump finds himself in, because this is sort of a debacle of his own making.
As I said, every story is not a process story, but this one does include some of that, to be sure. Mark Caputo from Axios, always a pleasure to read your work and have you on. Thank you.
Haley Robson. She is one of the Epstein survivors who spoke out on Capitol Hill along with other Epstein survivors, pushing for the release of all the Epstein files. You saw her in our preamble speaking so passionately in front of Capitol Hill just last week. And Haley, I appreciate your time. And, shouldn't get into how anybody voted, but in a world where this is an issue that should be apolitical and nonpartisan, I will just note for people, because you've been open about this, that you're a registered Republican and you voted for President Trump. So in that context, right, you're not coming with some political point of view against him, right? You're coming as a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein. And I want to give you a chance, Haley, to just explain how you feel when Trump today gets asked about the Epstein birthday book and he calls it a, quote, dead issue multiple times.
A dead issue to who, first of all? Your first mistake was assuming that you knew your voters. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake is now standing double down on what you said about it being a hoax. I'm not coming with hostility. I'm not angry. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I am disgusted. I am not even coming from a place of anger. I'm just coming from a place of how can we move on when the leader of the free world keeps calling this a hoax when indeed it is not a hoax. And then it's just kind of this feeling of like you're throwing everything at the wall to let it stick, and now you're an FBI informant, and now you're not an FBI informant, it's back to being a hoax. It's very confusing, and it's appalling. I'm appalled. It gets worse and worse every day.
It is shocking. I mean, and I guess I know you're exhausted and reliving these things is not what you want to do, but you're choosing to do it to make sure that we get to the truth and we get to justice. So people understand, so the president understands, if he hears you, Haley, you were 16 years old when you explain how a classmate recruited you. You said basically, oh, there's an old guy, he wants a massage, a rich guy, $200. You give him a massage, you get $200. And Epstein then, you say, abused you, gave you an ultimatum that you had to bring a girl to him every day. And you spoke at the Capitol about how you ended up in that situation, a 16-year-old girl where you felt you didn't have a choice because of his wealth and his power and who you were as a 16-year-old girl. So what is your reaction to all of this?
Well, first, let's address the he hears me. The president is hearing me. I think that communication is key when it's followed with comprehension. So I'm not sure that he's comprehending what I am trying to communicate to him. Obviously, you know, being a 16-year-old girl, not knowing how to navigate a situation, the one that I was put in, it's, you know, my younger self has become the woman that I needed in that moment. And I think for any 16-year-old, for any child to try to navigate that on their own is, you're going to have failure. You're going to have mistakes. There's no way any woman, let alone a 16-year-old child, is going to understand what's happening in that moment.
Yeah.
And so it's devastating going through that, you know, when you're 16 and having to live with that abuse and then coming out publicly after 17 years of being silenced and trying to get people to understand, and not just the president, not just the administration, not just the politicians, but trying to get people in the country to understand not only what we were put through, but the people that we're up against, the system that we're up against.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's been a failure on both sides.
So, you know, President Trump, you know, the note signed with his name in Epstein's birthday book says, "We have certain things in common, Jeffrey. May every day be another wonderful secret." And we don't know what that means. I mean, it's disgusting and crude, but we don't know what it means. But Republican Congressman Tom Massey, who is out there pounding the table, Haley, as you know, to get answers and to get to the truth in a bipartisan way. He is speaking out about his Republican colleagues who are not going along with him. There are a few, all women, who are, but the vast majority of them are not. And here's what he is saying as to why.
I don't think my colleagues are happy about covering up for pedophiles. But that's what's happening. And it's so sick and twisted. The reason they're doing it is because they're terrified of President Trump's political machine.
Do you think that's what it is? Haley, you've had a chance to speak to some of them in person. Is that what it is? They're afraid of Trump?
Well, again, let's be clear. I spoke in front of Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Ro Khanna. Those were the three representatives, including the female Democratic caucus. Not too many Republicans I've personally spoken to on this subject. Kudos to the women in the Republican Party for having more courage to stand up for what's right. I think this is exactly why we're in the place we're in society is you've got the bad guys and you've got the good guys, and the bad guys are silencing the good guys, which makes it impossible for the good men to stand up in situations like these to defend the women. And they are too being silenced if indeed this is all in accordance to Trump making the remark of, you know, if you're in this administration as a Republican and you go against the administration, you're now creating a hostile environment for the administration. I can understand the fear. You know, I can understand why they're being silenced, but you're hurting the survivors. You're hurting us. Yeah. And I feel like it's been enough of that.
It has been enough of that. And of course, those others who knew or participated are still not being held to account. Justice is not being brought. Haley, I appreciate your choosing again to continue speaking out. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Over the summer, Donald Trump's Deputy Attorney General and former personal lawyer, can't say that together too many times, Todd Blanche, met twice with Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted sex trafficker and, of course, accomplice of Jeffrey Epstein's. And in those interviews, Maxwell put distance between Trump and Epstein, saying that she did not recall ever seeing Trump in Epstein's home, except in Epstein's own email to Maxwell back in 2011, released just yesterday by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee. Epstein admitted that Trump did indeed visit one of his homes. Now, maybe she didn't see, but Maxwell's response to Epstein to that email was, quote, "I have been thinking about that." Really makes you wonder about just how honest Ghislaine Maxwell was in those interviews. and why Todd Blanche never brought up this piece of evidence in his interviews with Maxwell in the first place. Well, today Todd Blanche admitted on Twitter that despite being the #2 person at the Justice Department, he did not have that evidence at the time. Posting, quote, "When I interviewed Maxwell, law enforcement didn't have the materials Epstein's estate hid for years and only just provided to Congress." And let's just say I have a lot of questions about that admission. Joining me now is Senator Adam Schiff, who sits on the Judiciary Committee, and I'm betting has a lot of questions about that admission, too. Let's just start there. I mean, in that post, Todd Blanche confirmed something that I think, even in this age of a lot of stunning things, should be stunning, that he didn't have all the information when he interviewed Maxwell. What did that tell you?
Well, this goes to a central question about that whole interview, and that is, why didn't Todd Blanche actually bring someone familiar with the case, one of the prosecutors who had handled the case, that would know the facts, that would know when Maxwell was lying, when she was telling the truth? Now, one of those prosecutors was James Comey's daughter, who was fired from the Justice Department. But he brought no one who knew the facts and no one who could press Maxwell, test whether she's telling the truth. That, of course, was deliberate, because getting the truth from Maxwell was not the object. Getting an exonerating statement, exonerating testimony for Donald Trump was the object. And, of course, it appears that that resulted in Maxwell being transferred to this, minimum security concierge service providing institution that is not suitable for sex offenders. So on the one hand, it raises profound questions about why Blanche wasn't prepared and didn't know the facts. But more than that, it really underscores what Amanda said, and that is, we need a real investigation here. If they didn't have the emails from the estate, it's because Kash Patel didn't ask for them, didn't subpoena them, didn't want them. I think we see in these emails that are now dribbling out just why Bondi and Patel don't want to release what they already have and don't want to do the thorough investigation that was apparently never done by the government.
I have so many questions for you about this trove of emails, which I'm sure you haven't read all 23,000 pages. But just, I know we're living in a time where what the consequences that should happen don't always happen. We obviously can't unwind and go back in time and have Todd Blanche bring someone with him. As you said, he didn't intend to do that clearly. Ghislaine Maxwell, as you said, was transferred to a more minimum security prison where she's apparently playing with puppies and taking yoga classes. What should happen? You said an investigation should happen. In normal times, obviously, she should be transferred back, right? What else should happen given these revelations from these emails that she seemed to have lied multiple times?
Well, we should be doing oversight in Congress. Republicans should be helping to do that oversight to find out who made the decision to transfer her to this, sort of cushy prison. Who made that call? When I asked Kash Patel about it in the Judiciary Committee, he claimed that it was the Bureau of Prisons, and the Bureau of Prisons made that decision on their own. He knew nothing about it. The Justice Department wasn't involved somehow. That was the import of his testimony. That just doesn't pass the credibility test. So, number one, we need to do oversight in Congress. But number two, the Justice Department needs to do a real investigation. They need to release publicly what they have. These emails have already shed, I think, some significant light. I was really struck by something Donald Trump said over the summer when he acknowledged having a falling out with Epstein because Epstein was taking girls from Mar-a-Lago. And I remember asking myself, what did he think Epstein was doing with those girls? And now we see one of those emails that just came out makes reference to this when Epstein, I think, is telling Maxwell or telling someone else in those emails, well, of course he knew. That's why there was essentially this dispute over taking girls from Donald Trump or from Mar-a-Lago. So these emails are already shedding light. The White House is engaged in its usual sort of blitzkrieg of denials. But there needs to be a real investigation here, a serious investigation.
There's so many emails, to your point, and I think reporters and committee members and staff are still going through them. I want to ask you about one of them specifically that I don't think I paid as much attention to yesterday, but I did today, and I think a lot of people did. It's the one where Jeffrey Epstein says about Donald Trump, I am the one able to take him down. What do you think that means?
Well, I think the import is I know information on Donald Trump that the public hasn't seen yet, and it is very incriminating. This is, I think, where he refers also to it as the dog that hasn't barked. That is the information that isn't out there yet. So clearly he believes he has something that is valuable to him as potential extortion of Donald Trump, but also would be extremely damaging to the president. And probably a thorough investigation would reveal just what that is, if Epstein put it in writing to someone else or if there was physical evidence of that in the files.
If the House votes to release the Epstein files next week, and it sure looks like it will, Donald Trump will have to count on Republicans in the Senate to stop this from getting to his desk. And even then, he might have some problems.
I just don't think this issue is going to go away until that issue is addressed and answered to the American people's satisfaction.
Yeah.
And I may end up with a sombrero on my head for saying that, but that's the way I see it.
That's, of course, a reference to the video, the AI video that Trump did about Hakeem Jeffries. But back with me, of course, is Senator Adam Schiff. Now, it looks like, let's just talk about the mechanics of this, because it looks like there could be a lot of Republican support on the petition in the House. I'm going to talk to your California colleague, Ro Khanna, about that in just a moment. But what are you expecting to happen when it lands in the Senate?
Well, I would expect they will do everything they can to fight that passing in the Senate. And we're going to do what we can to make sure that that gets taken up. There are a number of tactics we can use in the Senate to compel a vote. We have compelled votes, for example, in the Judiciary Committee about releasing the Epstein files. Those votes didn't succeed, but I'm glad to hear Senator Kennedy, who sits on the Judiciary Committee with me, make comments like that, because it does show that some of the Republicans want this information to be public. They want to know who is responsible, who should be held accountable. So we will explore whatever methods, whatever tools we have to force votes on this. It is simply not going to go away. And I think the more the White House lets this drip, 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 the more they're going to wish they had just, released things and stop this campaign of, fighting disclosure, denial, followed by implausible denial, followed by implausible denial.
So there's, just to put a fine point on that, there's not a discharge petition process in the Senate, but there are ways to compel or to push for votes even without Senate Majority Leader Thune, who seems not inclined to do it at this moment. Is that right? Through a committee process?
Well, you can often force votes on things in committee. Forcing votes on the floor is a little bit more challenging. Some things are privileged, and we'll certainly explore whether there's anything privileged that can be made to fit disclosure of the Epstein files. But even if there isn't, there are ways to both negotiate. Okay, we're going to not put up a fight on this if you don't put up a fight on voting for that, or at least allowing us a vote on that. There is leverage that we can use. Now, as we have seen, the leverage is limited. We are very much in the minority, but we can make it very difficult.
I don't recall ever seeing him in his house, for instance. I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
Case closed. Ghislaine Maxwell, the only person to serve any jail time for Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. I mean, when's the last time you heard of any kind of situation of young women being abused, and it's a woman at the top of the food chain after the monster himself? Now, it's not case closed. Why? Because that interview that Maxwell did with Trump's deputy AG, Todd Blanche, is now called into question. Why? Because of how people are deciding to interpret one or two emails where she seemed to suggest that maybe Epstein was right and Trump had a lot he might say. And she said she never saw him in the house, but then Epstein said in one of the emails he spent so much time there with him, and she didn't correct him or say she didn't know that. So maybe she was lying, and that's why she's now getting all of this cushy prison camp treatment. How do we know? Well, that's what Congressman Jamie Raskin says. Look at this. Look at this. she has been receiving basically club fed or Trump hotel style treatment, concierge style treatment. She's had meals delivered to her cell, basically room service in prison. She gets to use the exercise facilities whenever she wants. She's got special arrangements where she's working with the warden to send materials to her defense team. We've also learned that she's in the process of seeking a commutation from President Trump. I love all the It's such groupthink. All right, so the White House says there is no commutation in the works at this time. That's a dangerous answer. But how much of this is fact and how much is fugazi? Let's ask one of Maxwell's lawyers, Arthur Idella. Arthur, it's great to see you. I love you. I haven't seen you in a while. You were both at my brother's thing the other night. Always good to see you. I know there are certain things you can't discuss because this is your client, but I want to ask you something. Do you recall in any conversation with Ghislaine Maxwell where she said, you know, you got to get me a meeting, Arthur, because there are all these guys' names that haven't come out yet, including Trump?
Obviously, Mr. Cuomo with the mustache that's growing on me, I would say, even through the course of the show here. And I did make a donation for the record because it's a good cause. So Ghislaine is
Continue.
she's a very strong woman. She's a very smart woman, right? But nobody wants to be in prison for 20 years. And I mean, I can tell you, first of all, let me just say this. I did not represent her when she was speaking to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States of America. But I have spoken to Ghislaine, my partner, Diana. Excuse me, Diana spoke to her either last week or the week before last. Everyone wants to help themselves, especially when you're in the Tallahassee prison, which was a horrible place. We visited her there. We spent time with her there. The guards were rough on us. God knows what they are to her. And anytime she would speak out, she would be put in solitary confinement. So, Chris, just the self-preservation aspect of human beings has to play a role in here. But she's never said anything about President Trump to me. I believe that she took her conversations with the Deputy Attorney General very, very seriously and told the truth. Even in these emails, Chris, there's nothing damning in there. There's nothing in there that would make rise that a prosecutor could bring a case. And so, bottom line
So now I got to flip it on you, though, Arthur, which is, yeah, I was with you on that. If somebody has that kind of information and they look at it in 20 years, they don't have to be asked twice to give it up, especially if one of the people they could talk about is the president, unless he's the sitting president. And if you shut your mouth, you get maybe a commutation and you get this peachy life that Jamie Raskin is talking about, which evidently she has now.
But she's been under this cloud during the Biden administration as well. And don't you think, Chris, after they've gone after him, I mean, I'm just basing this on common sense, but don't you think the way they've gone after Donald Trump any way possible, if she had the ability to go to the DOJ of Merrick Garland under President Biden and say, look, I can take Trump down if you want him out of your life. It's just not the case. It's just not the facts. Look, here's where she's allowed me to violate the attorney-client privilege. You know what she said to me when we were face-to-face? Is we don't talk about this. We talk about the law. We talk about her trial. We talk about her appellate issues. But she's like, Arthur, she has an interesting accent. It's not really British, but it's not really American. She's like, Arthur, I'm allowed to curse. I guess I can curse a little bit. She's like, Arthur, it's all bullshit. She's like, he's dead. And if I say anything, I get put in solitary confinement. So they're allowed to create this fairy tale in this storybook. Look, Chris, I heard about how much money the Epstein estate gave out. But all you had to kind of do was line up and say that this happened. There was no checks and balances, and they were writing out a check. I am positive from what I know that there was some young women there who were absolutely hurt and deserve that. I don't put Virginia Giuffre in that category. We've caught her lying so many times. The federal government, when they tried Ghislaine's case, they interviewed Giuffre for hours, maybe days. They never put her on the stand. You're a lawyer. Why? Why? Because she wasn't credible. She accused our friend Alan 6 times in 6 places, and then after years, when he sued her for defamation, then that's the case I handled against you, Frey. I may have made a mistake. Maybe it wasn't Alan Dershowitz over 6 times in 6 different locations. Ruined the guy's life. Ruined Dershowitz's life in his 80s by being falsely accused of this. So I heard the beginning of the show, and I'm not saying this because it's you and it's your show and you're my friend. You're absolutely correct. This is being used as a tool. It's being and you showed that in the beginning it was being used as a tool by the Republicans. Now it's being used as a tool by the Democrats. It's just being used as a tool. Folks, I do a lot of criminal law. I hate to break the news to you. There are a lot of pedophiles out there. We're dealing with some high-level people, and we don't hear about them because it's not being used as a tool the way this one is being used as a tool. And it's sad because I call BS on this is about the survivors. I don't believe it's really about the survivors. I think it's about everything maybe but the survivors, because most of those survivors have gotten, as you said, millions of dollars already, and they're on with their lives.
Listen, I'm with you, Arthur. I mean, look, the victimization to me seems, I have another good buddy who was a lawyer for a couple of the victims. They were very, very credible. And I think this guy's a real monster. And I think Maxwell's got her work cut out for her getting a commutation because, especially with all this hullabaloo going on around this. But they got to release the files because this has become too big a blister.
I don't disagree with
you.
One
Nobody
quick point,
trusts
Chris.
anything. It's got to come out. Make your last point.
I just don't know how the guest was talking about Elaine's getting all this special treatment here, there, and everywhere. Yes, she went into a very high security environment to a much lower security environment. Every inmate is allowed to use the exercise equipment, during waking hours. Yes, the wardens and the staff do help you file legal paperwork. That's not a Ghislaine thing. That's when in that particular environment, in that facility that she's in, you're allowed to do that. There are some inmates who are allowed to leave because they're on sanitation duty and things like that. So, I mean, I don't know where they're getting their information from, but Ghislaine's hanging tough.
They're making a play that Trump is making things nice for her because he doesn't want her to talk or whatever. We get the politics, but we got to release the files because it's the only way anybody will ever have any objective basis of judgment. I think they'll still be disappointed, but we are where we are. Arthur Idala, thank you very much. You look great,
handlebar,
by the
maybe,
way.
Chris.
It's a
Little handlebar.
Beautiful tie. Listen, I'm raising money for Movember. Then I'm going to shave it. All right, I got to go. Dusty's yelling at me. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.
Photo here of VP candidate Tim Walz's distant relatives endorsing former President Donald Trump. This photo has gone viral. Despite their familial connection, they've never actually met Walz. The family found out about Walz's VP nomination on the radio and expressed disappointment at not being informed earlier. Well, tonight, Trump expressed gratitude for their endorsement in a Fox News town hall with Sean Hannity tonight in Pennsylvania. Well, in that same town hall, Trump also warned that the U.S. is heading toward World War III territory. That's a quote. This is all due to ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza under the Biden-Harris administration.
We're heading into World War III territory. You need a president that's not going to be taking you into war. We won't have World War III when I'm elected, but with these clowns that you have in there now, you're going to end up having World War III, and it's going to be a war like no other.
Trump also warned if his administration's tax cuts, set to expire next year, are not extended, Americans could face the largest tax increase in history. He added that a Harris victory could potentially plunge the country into an economic depression similar to 1929. And in a new interview, Trump expresses his support of releasing classified files on UFOs, the JFK assassination, and the Jeffrey Epstein case.
They do that for danger, too, because, endangers certain people, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice to see you. Are you exhausted? Well, I had a long day. I had a really long day. I tell you, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Now I can give you a little more time, right?
There's a lot of intrigue surrounding the release of the Epstein files, Martin Luther King files, John F. Kennedy files. Some current and former FBI agents are saying, some of them telling me, that they feel the FBI establishment came out ahead in the standoff sort of with the New York FBI field office over releasing the records, and your Attorney General Pam Bondi demanding them but not getting all that she wanted. Is that process still on track? I think that's one of the most often questions I've been asked the last couple of days, to release these records on Epstein, MLK, and JFK.
Well, Pam Bondi's done a phenomenal job in every respect. And there could have been some holdback. I haven't heard too much about it, but they could. But the bottom line is the records are getting out. The Kennedy records are getting out. Those are the ones they really wanted to see the most, were the Kennedys. And during my administration, as you know, I released a lot of them, but then a lot of people started coming in, people that I respected, people that worked for the administration, asked me not to release the rest. And I respected that. They gave me certain reasons, but I respected that. And I did say, I must tell you, I said that probably wish I did release the whole thing, because I have no idea what's in there. But since then they found, and we found 2,000 more documents on Kennedy. And the one they want most is Kennedy, and it's going to be released. It's moving along, and it's moving along pretty rapidly.